Welcome everyone to the Lawyers Committee and the Truth Action Project program. Today's program is called Recognizing and Pushing Back the Post 9/11 Police State. Our next speaker is Francis Boyle. Dr. Francis Boyle is an American human rights lawyer and professor of international law at the University of Illinois, Chicago of Law. He drafted the United States domestic implementing legislation for the Biological Weapons Convention, known as the Biological Weapons Anti-Terrorism Act of 1989. He was approved unanimously by both houses of the United States and signed into law that legislation by the President George H.W. Bush. Francis Boyle will discuss as his topic today, bioweapon moratorium needed, the failure to properly investigate the post 9/11 anthrax attacks has led to a COVID pandemic fraught with unseen and even more dangerous and sinister bioweapons possibilities, including smallpox, Ebola, anthrax, superbugs, etc. Thank you, Dr. Boyle, for being with us today.
Thank you, David, for having me on. I did want to express my condolences to those viewing our program who are next of kin or friends of the victims of the 9/11 attacks and the first responders. We all want to get to the truth here of what really happened. And that is why I am appearing here today. 19 years ago today, about 11 a.m., September 13th, 2001, I was contacted by a producer for the O'Reilly Factor to appear that night to debate Bill O'Reilly on war versus peace. Obviously, 2 days after the attacks, that was like deliberately walking into a buzzsaw. But the lot had fallen to me, and I decided I had to debate O'Reilly. So I appeared that evening. I think I did send David a copy of my write-up on that. And I argued quite simply in front of millions of people that the evidence was not there. What the government was saying simply did not add up. And I have been continuously arguing that point ever since then. And as you know, the more the evidence came out, the less the government count made sense, including the 9/11 Commission report, which was a cover-up drafted by Condi Rice's buddy. I continue to argue this point in every interview I gave until the anthrax attacks. As David correctly pointed out, I had called for and drafted the U.S. domestic implementing legislation for the Biological Weapons Convention, known as the Biological Weapons Anti-Terrorism Act, that was passed unanimously by both houses of the United States Congress and signed into law by President George Bush Sr. and is still there on the books, providing life imprisonment for violators. And I followed all of this very closely. And finally, as was correctly pointed out by my friend Graham, Senators Dashiell and Leahy were holding up the passage of the USA Patriot Act. Well, as it later turned out, the Patriot Act had already been drafted over there in the Department of Injustice under Ashcroft by this Federalist Society lawyer, Viet Din. It was ready to go. He just pulled it off the shelf and put it out there. And all of a sudden, then Dashiell and Leahy got hit with anthrax. And the New York Times printed the technology behind the letter to Dashiell. It was super weapons grade anthrax, 100 spores per gram with a special coating that enabled it to float in the air. So I immediately realized that this could only have come out of a United States biological weapons program and laboratory, and probably wearing a moon suit with your own portable oxygen supply because it was just too dangerous. So I immediately called up a high-level official in the FBI, Marion Spike Bowman, who was a top-level lawyer in their counterintelligence division. Bowman and I had both spoken at a conference on international terrorism at the University of Michigan Law School. I gave a speech on the Lockerbie bombing matter that I was heavily involved in. Bowman gave a speech on biological weapons. And afterwards, I had a nice talk with him. I explained my involvement in drafting the implementing legislation and following this matter intently since about 1984 or so, when the Council of Responsible Genetics asked me to get involved in the matter for them and handle it. So I still had Bowman's card right there in my office. I pulled it up. I immediately called Bowman. I got through immediately to Bowman and I said, look, now this is the day the anthrax technology was reported in the New York Times. I think that was about October 26th. And by the way, I've written all this up in my book, Biowarfare and Terrorism, if you want to have a look at it, with footnotes. And I told Bowman, high-level lawyer in the FBI headquarters, I said, look, this is super weapons grade anthrax. It could only have been manufactured in a US biological weapons program and laboratory. And there's a complete list of these things in the Pentagon's Biological Defense Research Program. And it was also revealed in the summer of 2000 in the book Germs by Miller and Broad, then of the New York Times, that the CIA was also involved in anthrax program. Bowman then told me, okay, he was going to forward my information on to the people handling the anthrax investigation. I said, fine, I hung up the phone. It then occurred to me that I had a complete list in the public record of all US government biological warfare programs, including anthrax, which I got back in those days. You could actually get these things. It was listed right there in the Biological Defense Research Program by the Pentagon in an appendix. The Council for Responsible Genetics asked me to do a critique for this, to respond to the US government. You can read that critique in my book. So I immediately called back Bowman and I said, look, I told you this could only have come out of a US biological warfare weapons program by the Pentagon. I have the complete list here for anthrax. And I went through the entire list right out of the Pentagon's own BDRP, which, by the way, that cover-up was written here at the University of Illinois, our computer engineering research lab by the Department of Defense. So I said, you need that's your list. It's a very short little list. And we also know that the CIA is doing this. Obviously, you're going to have to go over there to the CIA with warrants and subpoenas and root out exactly what they were doing over there. But these are the people, I'm sure, who were behind certainly the Daschle and Leahy technology and probably behind the anthrax attacks themselves. So Bowman then said to me, well, we're working with Fort Detrick on this. And I said, well, with all due respect, Fort Detrick could be the problem here. You could have someone on the reservation who is now off the reservation. Bowman then said, okay, I'll send all this information on to the FBI people in charge of the investigation. This was the last week in October 2001, and I gave them the citation for the list on this matter. I had assumed that the FBI was handling this, and then what happened, as we know, this involved Ames strain anthrax. The FBI did send people out to the US government lab at Ames, Iowa, where they had the collection of all the Ames anthrax. And the FBI told these people to destroy all of it. That was also reported in the New York Times. So at that point, I knew full well the FBI was involved in a cover-up here for either the Department of Defense or the CIA or both. This destruction of the Ames collection was obviously obstruction of justice, and it was a felony. And you could not believe anything at all. From that point in time on, the FBI was saying their total investigation was a joke and a fraud and obstruction of justice and a felony, and I won't go through it all here. Now, it also turns out that Marion Spike Bowman killed the requested FISA warrant into the Moussaoui computer up there asked for by the FBI field office in Minnesota. They requested a FISA warrant to get into Moussaoui's computer. And according to the David Ray Griffith book, it was Spike Bowman who personally killed that Moussaoui FISA warrant. The alleged grounds was that, well, it never would have passed a FISA requirement. Well, that's total baloney. As we know, the FISA court is a kangaroo court with a rubber stamp. They don't deny any warrants, certainly not with the evidence being presented up there in the FBI field office. They could have gotten that FISA warrant in August and access to Moussaoui's computer. Maybe the whole thing would have been exposed and stopped, and we never would have had 9/11. In any event, I pointed out in my book, I argued in 2005, it was my opinion that if we got to whoever was behind the anthrax attacks, that would lead to whoever was behind the 9/11-2001 attacks, because it seemed to me they were coordinated with each other. This, as I put in my book, was a 1-2 blow against the American Republic, against the American people, and against the American Constitution. And by the way, Mueller was the director of the FBI. He had just been appointed by Bush Jr. We know Bush Jr. had been briefed in August that a terrorist attack was coming, and he completely ignored it. We know Ashcroft was flying around in a private plane. Obviously, he had been warned. And Mueller, I had been up against before in the Lockerbie bombing matter. Mueller was the one who fixed the facts against Libya and had been lying to the American people ever since. I can assure you people over in Scotland do not believe for a minute that the two Libyans were behind that. Indeed, they sent a camera crew all the way over here to the United States to interview me on that point, and I explained it all to them. So yes, as Graham McQueen pointed out, all the facts indicate that this was super weapons grade anthrax. It came out of a US biological warfare program, either and or both run by the Department of Defense and or the CIA. Indeed, later on, even the New York Times reported, I believe it was in December of 2001, that the CIA was involved in developing super weapons grade anthrax. And as Graham and others of I have concluded involved in this matter, Battelle was involved and working on the anthrax. So, and the danger here is that anthrax lives for decades. So there is still a stockpile of super weapons grade anthrax out there that can be used again against the American people, against the American Congress, against the Constitution. My guess is that stockpile super weapons grade anthrax is still at Dugway today. Now, this then moves into the current COVID-19 pandemic. Right after I spoke with Bowman in the last week in October, telling him the anthrax came out of the U.S. Biological Warfare Weapons Program, I then went out to Harvard University, to the Harvard Divinity School, where I was chairing a workshop for the Council for Responsible Genetics against biological weapons. And on my way into the Harvard Divinity School, there was a camera crew from Fox News in Boston asking me my opinion about the anthrax attacks. I said, it's obvious this came out of a U.S. Biological Warfare program. They would be the only people with the capability to produce super weapons grade anthrax. Inside, I said the same thing at the Council for Responsible Genetics workshop, and my colleague on there, Professor John King, who heads founder of the Council for Responsible Genetics and heads the professor of biology there at MIT, heads their electron microscope problem, said the exact same thing. I then came back here to my office and starting the first week in November, gave an interview to Pacifica Radio Network that went out nationwide saying this exact same thing. Then the BBC called me and I said the exact same thing on the BBC. Then an order was given never to interview me again by anyone on biological warfare or biological weapons in the mainstream news media. And that order has held up until today with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic. On January 24, 2020, I issued a worldwide alert to well over 500 news media sources and all over the internet that the Wuhan coronavirus was an offensive biological warfare weapon based on DNA, genetic engineering, and with gain of function properties that had leaked out of that Wuhan BSL-4, which was China's Fort Detrick. And I felt it was existentially dangerous, and every BSL-3 and BSL-4 in this country, and indeed in the world, should be shut down. As a matter of fact, I said that in the award-winning documentary Anthrax War by Nadler and Cohn. I said this is a catastrophe waiting to happen, and it has now happened. Starting then on that interview I gave an interview to Geopolitics and Empire later that day, January 24, 2020, saying the exact same thing. This was a biological warfare weapon, existentially dangerous. It had leaked out of that Wuhan BSL-4, and every BSL-3, BSL-4 had to be shut down immediately. That went viral all over the world. I spent full time giving interviews starting the next week until finally they tapered off June 1. I'm not going to go through all those interviews here. You can Google my name starting January 24, and you can see all the interviews I have given. Now we find out from the Woodward tapes last week, within the last week, that Trump has been lying from the get-go on the COVID-19, that it is existentially dangerous. It travels through the air, because Wuhan BSL-4, they bragged about applying nanotechnology to viruses. Nanotechnology is necessary to aerosol viruses for delivery by air to human beings. That's the only reason you aerosol a virus like this. Fort Detrick does the exact same thing. We all know Fort Detrick is involved in research, development, testing, stockpiling of biological warfare weapons. Anthrax, Amerithrax was one of it. COVID-19 is another. Finally, at the end of April 2020, an Israeli law firm contacted me, and they had sued China in the Israeli court system over COVID-19. They asked me to give them a declaration of my expert opinion that COVID-19 was an offensive biological warfare weapon that leaked out of that Wuhan BSL-4, which I did do, dated June 6, 2020. I sent a copy of that declaration to David. He has it there. If David wants to distribute it, that's fine with me. If you want a copy, ask David for it. I then gave a lecture on June 26 to the Maharashtra Business Program School at the Peace University in Pune, India, saying the exact same thing and going through all the evidence for that. All the arguments I originally made as of January 24 have been routinely confirmed by every source coming out in reputable news media sources since then, up to and including now the Woodward tapes. We've been lied to from the get-go by the Trump administration on COVID-19. We've been lied to by the CDC, acting under pressure from the Trump administration, by the National Institutes of Health, by NIAID under Fauci. They've all been lying, spinning, and covering up how dangerous COVID-19 really is. It floats through the air. It has a lethality rate maybe in the area of 15% for SARS. This is SARS on steroids. That is what is confronting us today here in the United States, as well over 200,000 Americans have died. And I think we have to be aware of this. We cannot trust what the Trump administration is saying, or the CDC, or National Institute of Health, or NIAID. You are going to have to rely upon independent experts who have not taken one penny of this dirty Nazi biological warfare work that the United States government has been involved in since after 9/11/2001, under the pretext of Amerithrax that they inflicted upon us. My estimate as of 2015 is that at least 13,000 life scientists have been involved in research, development, testing of biological warfare weapons. You cannot trust any of these people. You have to get outside independent experts who have not taken this type of money to give you proper advice on how to combat and defeat COVID-19, which is staring us in the face right now. It could prove to be just as deadly as the Spanish flu virus if it is not handled and dealt with, and certainly it is not. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Francis.